What's your name?
Stephanie Minnick.
Awesome. We'll get straight into the questions. Can you tell me a little bit about your childhood?
Yeah, I grew up in a very small dairy town in upstate New York and came from a poor family. I had a lot of good things in my childhood. I had a lot of bad things in my childhood. Um, there were a lot of drugs in my home, a lot of abuse. I did have somebody that was in my corner. My aunt was always there for me, so that made a tremendous difference for me, I think. Had I not had her, I definitely would not be where I am now. Um, Growing up, I definitely did not have the things that my friends had. Got picked on a lot. Um, Shopped at Walmart. Definitely got bullied in school. But I was always very curious. I was always very headstrong. Education was my thing. I always did really well in school. I was the oldest child, so always the responsible one, always the driven one, looking out for everybody else kind of thing. Not rocking the boat taught me to, not really speak up for myself. A lot of the things that happened to me in my childhood, I think, reverberated throughout so much of my 20s. In the way that I just didn't know that I could speak up for myself. I didn't know that I could say no, and all of those things kind of trickled out. Um, Looking back now, obviously I have a much different perspective about the things that happened to me. I'm not grateful for what I went through, but I can see how each one of those lessons, I use it to my advantage. Not everybody has that chance or choice, but I choose to especially use the bad things that have happened to me.
What were your dreams as a child?
I wanted to be a backup dancer as a kid. Like that was making up some Paula Abdul dances in my room when I was a kid. But I did always, I thought I would be a writer. I always thought I would be a writer because I was so into books. That was kind of my saving grace as a child. And I also don't know that I thought too far ahead. I didn't know that I was going to make it through.
Can you tell me about your relationship with your dad or the closest figure to a dad?
Yeah, so my father, if you had asked me this question 10 years ago, it would be totally different. Growing up, I was kind of daddy's girl. I was definitely the golden child. I think, for him, he didn't think he was ever going to have kids and stuff like that, and probably definitely not a girl first. Um, my father had Hell's Angels tattoo. He was from Jacksonville, Florida. Um, rough,
Yeah.
rough going. I know that he had a rough childhood. Um, Got in a lot of trouble. He met my mom. I want to say in his early 30s, maybe. He worked with the carnival, with the fair and stuff. He worked on oil rigs. He did all sorts of things. And growing up, my relationship with him, it was tumultuous in the way, because of the way he treated others. He was abusive to my mother. He was abusive to my brother. He was not that way to me. When I think about my father, I think about like sitting at the kitchen table and listening to Marty Robbins and Johnny Cash, and of course he was drinking and smoking. He did tattoos, so there were like tattoos being done at my dining room table. I would come home from school and there'd be a whole mess of people in there drinking and doing all sorts of stuff, which made for a very uncomfortable living environment because you never knew what you were going to come home to. And as a teenager, I kind of despised my father. We had a relationship over drugs. We got high together, which I know in his mind was a connection. It's not the connection I was hoping for. And it took being away to just get more perspective. And it also took understanding that, his relationship with my mom and my brother was something totally different than his relationship with me, and I couldn't hold him accountable for their relationship, I could really only think about the relationship that I had with him. He died 10 years ago. He died of COPD, and he was only 6 years old. And I had a lot of anger at that time. I had a younger brother. I have a sister who's 12 years younger, so she was still at home. And there was just a lot of animosity over the way they were raising her and what they weren't doing, you know, how they weren't parenting her. So there was a lot of anger on my end. And when I found out that he was sick, you know, I was pretty transparent and blunt with him. And I told him, you know, like, you have a chance that most people don't have. You should make amends, you know, to mom, to your brothers and sisters, like whoever it is, you need to do that. And I told him that I would forgive him on some level if he would write me letters and tell me about him, because I didn't really know anything about him. I knew that he was born in 1950, so he grew up in the 60s. I was like totally enamored with all of that, but I didn't really know about him. So it was through those letters that I came to learn about him, working with the fair, working on the oil rigs, and all these adventures that I never imagined my dad having. He was born in 1950. In 1952, he fell out of a second-story window and smashed his skull. So he's a miracle, and all of us are miracles, you know, that stem from that. And if you think about that time, 1952, I mean, what they didn't have to help people. You know, so he had several different surgeries. They had a steel plate put in his head, so his forehead kind of always sagged a little bit on that side, and you could see the steel plate. And growing up, I didn't know anything about traumatic brain injury. I just saw that my dad was getting high all the time. He wasn't working. My mom was working her ass off. Right? You know, so I just saw this person who sat around and didn't do anything.
How did your relationship with him feel as a kid versus to when it transitioned to what it is now?
I definitely have to give myself grace for all of the animosity that I had for him. I spit in my father's face when I was 16 years old, and it's embarrassing. When he died, though, we had talked about a lot of stuff. We had patched things up absolutely as much as you could possibly hope for. I was the last person to talk to him before he died. He called me the night before he died, and we had a really awesome conversation. And I heard him when he was hanging up the phone. He had the nurse take the phone, and he was telling his nurse about me and that I was going to be like Bones, because I had went to school for forensic anthropology. And he sounded so proud and so happy, and he had no idea that I was listening, and it was really beautiful. So that was kind of my last contact with my dad. So I definitely, you know, feel much more at peace now. And I worked at a brain center a couple years ago that specialized in TBIs. So I was able to learn that so many traumatic brain injuries can lead to addiction, and just so many other things, physical violence, aggression, all of those things that I saw on a regular basis throughout my childhood. I now, you know, really contribute to his injury, which doesn't take away all of the blame, but, you know, I can see it from such a different level. And I really, you know, when he was in the middle of dying, I just thought, you know, if I were 60 years old and I were him, confined in a bed, completely lucid about the things that I've done in my life, to my wife, to my children, I would hope that like somebody would, you know, take pity on me, not take pity on me, but have some grace. And I would definitely hope it would be one of my children. So I did that, even though there wasn't a part of me that was totally there yet.
What about your relationship with your mom?
I don't have a good relationship with my mom. I don't really have a relationship with my mom. Growing up, she was very she was very neglectful. I mean, she did work all the time. She put clothes on our back, she fed us, all of those things. But she was also willfully neglectful, very much so on an emotional level. Not nurturing, none of those things. I don't even remember my mother like really hugging me until I was 27. And I think that she has a lot of mental health issues. I think so much of that stems from trauma. I know that she's a victim of violence, but it's hard to separate her victimhood and like my childhood and what I lost out on, not only as a kid but as a woman, and just having a relationship with your mother. I've never felt close to her. I've never felt loved by her. And now she's really at a point that it's not her fault anymore, but it's been so many years that I just I've gotten on with my life. And I've said to her, I am who I am, like, despite all of the things that you did or didn't do to me. And I like who I am. So.
How does that feel? Just it's okay. It feels peaceful.
Yeah, actually, I never would have thought of that word, but yeah, I just feel peaceful. I mean, a couple years ago, I really kind of hit a point with her that, you can bend over backwards for some people and they'll still walk all over you. And while I can have compassion for the things that she went through throughout her life, there was also a choice that she made. It was a choice that she made to stay and put her 3 children in dangerous situations and in situations that are going to impact them throughout the rest of their lives. So I wouldn't say that there's animosity still there, but it is what it is, and I think more than anything, I just feel sadness for her. I feel sad that, she stayed in a marriage for so many years, that even though they said they loved each other, that was not what was conveyed to us in our home. I feel sad for her that she just seems very unhappy. She seems miserable, and some people are kind of happy being miserable. And as somebody who wanted so badly to have a good life and be happy, it was really difficult being raised with somebody like that. And it's still very apparent in her demeanor and the way she makes her choices. There's so many things that we have a choice about, and no matter what I've done to kind of shed some light or anything, I can't do anything about it. And I finally stopped trying, and it feels good.
What would you say you learned from them?
From my parents? Compassion, just looking at both of their lives and being a grown-up now and thinking, when my mom was 38, she had a 13-year-old, a 9-year-old, and a 1-year-old, and she was miserable, and she was working so hard, and she would come home, to the table being full of drugs and stuff like that, and I saw this woman who was just losing her mind and screaming all the time. But as a grown woman, I can completely understand that frustration. And I think just compassion for my father and what he must have been trying to work through in a world that does not recognize traumatic brain injury, in a system that does not bring awareness to it or, anything like that. And I also very much learned who I don't want to be. I mean, that was the big thing for me in my childhood was I don't want to be like these people. I don't want to be feeling stuck. I don't want to be feeling angry. I don't want to be in these vicious relationships that definitely don't convey happiness or love. So, my thing was, if I get a really good education, I can get out of here and get away from that. And that was just what I was always striving for, was just to get away.
Can you tell me about your first love and how that felt?
That's probably my sister. She was born when I was 12, and she was just my saving grace, very much so. I mean, I already at 12, had thought about suicide, and when she came into the world, it was just like, someone's got to be here for her, and that was something that I still, continue to think about. But there was always that, like, I can't leave her here. Can't leave her here. And I adore the hell out of her. I took her everywhere. She kind of grew up with me and my friends. She was always with me. And that was, it was a really big thing for me as a big sister. Me and my brother didn't get along. He was physically abusive to me when we were kids. And we just had a very, very tumultuous relationship. But my sister was just my baby.
Can you tell me about your first loss or heartbreak and how that felt?
I had loss and heartbreak, as a teenager, but I think the first thing that like really destroyed me when I was 20, I lived in Jacksonville, North Carolina, and I had a friend who, she was pregnant. I had went to massage school. I was planning on being a doula. I wanted to work with babies and pregnant women and all that kind of stuff. And I was there for the birth of her child, and I did like acupressure points and just all sorts of stuff to help during the labor, and saw the baby born, and it was the most amazing experience I've ever had. And 6 weeks later, I got a call in the middle of the night, and she was screaming, I need you to come over here. I need you to get here right now. And she had a 3-year-old son who was deaf. But at some point in the night, the baby had stopped breathing. So I flew over there as fast as I could. I had no idea what was going on wrong. I knew it probably had to do something with the baby, and I got there, and there were ambulances everywhere. And they listed her death as SIDS. And it knocked me down for a really long time. I didn't talk about it with anybody, but it just destroyed my faith. I definitely cursed God a lot at that time. And that really, it took an emotional toll on me. So much so that I ended up going a completely different route in my career, and just deciding that I never wanted to have anything to do with that. I never ever wanted to experience that again. That was probably the first big, huge heartbreak that didn't have to do with love.
Who would you say first taught you love, and how?
My aunt. My aunt was, she was always there for me growing up. She was in the Air Force, and I think that she was in Korea when I was born. But she came back when I was about 7 months old. And, growing up, I was always at her house on the weekend. I had my snack time at 9 o'clock. I mean, my aunt would do the craziest stuff with me. I remember her like moving the furniture around and line dancing with me, like, because that's what was cool back then. And, playing badminton out back, took me to the pool. She did anything and everything I wanted to, not in the way that it spoiled me, but in the way that it nurtured me. She really loved me. She hugged me. She always told me that she loved me. And I think that had she not been in my life, I don't think I would have made it through. And it was always something to look forward to, getting out of my house and being able to go to my aunt's for the weekend. So.
What's love to you now versus what it was to you compared when you were younger? And how do those two different loves feel?
I think love now, I mean, it is peaceful to me. I have a very good marriage. My husband is my best friend, and he's very kind to me, which is something that definitely was not modeled in growing up. You know, when I was a kid, there was just screaming and violence and throwing things and sexual violence and just so many things going on. Yet my father would always tell the same story about meeting my mother. He saw her walk down the boardwalk and he knew that that was the woman he was going to marry. And he still told that story, you know, 30 years later. It's so sad to me that that was love for them. And I'm so grateful. Just the serenity, I think, that I have in my relationship. We communicate. I mean, my husband has no choice but to communicate with me because I'm a talker. I will draw it out. And I know how important it is to have the tough conversations. So we have them. You know, we definitely have them, but we get along really well. And I think that we have a respect for one another that I don't see in a lot of relationships. And I feel very grateful that I have that.
Can you tell me about a general good day for you?
Every day is usually a good day. I have stopped working for other people, and that definitely makes things a lot better.
Yeah.
Being your own boss, that makes a huge difference. I like to wake up to the sun coming in my window and just waking up with my husband. It's such a simple thing, but to me, like just waking up with the sunshine and like having some coffee and making some bacon and those are not things that I thought that I would have. And just being able to eat healthy, buying whatever I want at the grocery store. You know, when I was a kid, I thought like if you've got Charmin toilet paper, if you have Velveeta shells and cheese, then you're rich. Yeah. Now if you have toilet paper, you're good. You know, but there's so many things that I didn't necessarily think that I would have. And if somebody had told me 20 years ago that there's going to be a global pandemic and you're going to be running your business from home and going to the gym and eating organic food, I never would have thought that, you know, this would be my life.
So we have a lot of good days. Do any bad days sneak in? And if that bad day that does sneak in, how do you push through it?
Yeah, hell yeah. I got bad days. I'm a trauma recovery coach, so a lot of people probably do not want to hear this from me, but I really compare suffering. You know, for me, I have always been a suck it up and keep going person. And I think that on one hand, you know, that is just really beneficial. It's a survival skill, you know, and it helped me survive. I can also see the downside of that, of not acknowledging your pain while you're going through it. You know, now, if I'm having an off day, I let myself have an off day. I am like, okay, drama queen. Like, give yourself, like, you know, depending on what's going on, you know, I'll allow myself like 2 or 3 days to grieve over something or whatever it is and just like feel it in its entirety, whether I'm being dramatic or angry or whatever. I think all of those emotions are really necessary, and I get my shit together and get back up. You know, I'm able to handle things now in such a different way. I used to numb everything with alcohol, and I have made it a point, you know, in the last like year or two to not allow myself to emotionally drink. I lost a friend a year ago, just over a year ago. He overdosed on heroin, somebody that I've known his whole life, loved so much. And that was really the first thing that I was able to get through sober. I didn't think that I was going to, but I forced myself to, and just feel it and cry for days. And I'm very much into honoring my feelings now. And I also have gotten much better at removing myself from the situation versus vomiting up anger or, yelling and that kind of stuff. You got to retrain yourself from like all the things that you grew up with. And I've had to spend a lot of time retraining how I communicate, how I feel my feelings, and also just looking on the bright side of stuff. All of these things that I've wanted in my life, I've gotten. And it's because I have chosen to, take good from the bad, because it happens. It happens to everybody.
What's a person or event that's shaped you, good or bad? How does it feel when you reflect on it?
I would say event. I did a study abroad to Australia in 2008, and it was kind of my like leaving my abuser present to myself, and to really
You got to know when and how to treat
still
yourself. That sounds
still
like a good
paying
time.
off those school loans, but totally worth it.
Yeah.
I was 25 at the time, and I remember like having the thought of like I need to get out of here. I was doing massage, I was finishing up school, and I was just completely depleted. And because I had been sucking it up and going strong for so long and not acknowledging any of my pain, so when I first had that thought of like, I'll do a study abroad, I'm like, that's crazy. Nobody does a study abroad when they're 25. And I did it. I mean, I called my aunt from the airport that night crying in the bathroom. I'm like, what am I doing? I'm too old. Why didn't you talk me out of this? I was terrified. I was terrified of flying 16 hours. I mean, I can't swim very well. So like my first weekend there, we went on this sailing trip, and I literally was in the bathroom talking to myself in the mirror. I'm like, I'm not going to get off the boat. There's probably sharks out there. I'm like, get off the boat. You're in Australia, So I've had a lot of situations like that, but Australia was just, oh my God, a dream come true. You got to go.
Yeah.
It was incredible. I was there for 5 months, and the schooling was amazing. And I made friends there that I still talk to. I'm still friends with. I saw some of the most incredible places you could ever want to see. And that to me, it really helped my self-confidence. Just knowing that like nobody did this for me. I did it. And it was a lot of work to get everything in line, for myself to move to another country for 5 months. But it was so good for my self-confidence. And I'd always wanted to go there when I was like 5 years old. My dad got me National Geographic magazine. So my aunt said I would sit there and turn every page, be like, how far is this one? How far is that? And she said, you always want to go to the islands. And so yeah, when I was able to accomplish that dream, that was huge for me.
What did you learn just being around different types of people?
I just loved it. I have always really enjoyed diversity, and growing up in a really small white town, there was not a lot of that. And I think that was really part of me, wanting to break away from there. Incredible people, but just also a lot of people that hadn't been to many places. There's a lot of small mind mentality, and I didn't like that. So I forced myself, when I went to massage school, I went to a place where I didn't know anybody. I was a minority. I was terrified just because it was such a new experience. I didn't like talking to strangers. Like, it was so different, but I did it. I always push myself to go into situations that terrify me. But I think, being in Australia, we went to the Outback, and my friend and I were the only 2 Americans on the trip, and there were probably like 50 other people from countries all over the world. And we went on a sailing trip, and again, we were the only 2 Americans. And it was, I think everybody should get outside of their country politically to see it from a completely different perspective. But yeah, I loved it. being able to make friends with people that had a completely different upbringing because of school and different cultures and all of that. I love it. So
What's inspired you?
people that rise up from their stuff. I mean that to me, growing up, I can't think of really anybody in particular growing up that I, looked up to, but over the years, just it's the same thing. It's just seeing people turn their stuff into something good. That's why I was, attracted to everything that you're doing online. I just think it's so important for people to learn something from the bad stuff that happens, because otherwise you're just going to be pissed off the rest of your life, and then you waste what precious time that you have. Doesn't mean that you don't feel the anger or the hurt and the pain and all of that, but at some point I think being able to pick yourself back up, it's inspiring. People that can change, people change every day. I think that is that inspires me.
What's been a humbling experience for you?
In 2011, I bought a one-way ticket to Hawaii because I couldn't deal with my life. And that definitely did not go how I planned. And it ended up being a good 4 or 5 year 4 or 5 years of just the hits kept on coming. That was humbling. I went from having my own place, my own car, my organic food, my health food, my gym, all the things that made me, to not having a job, not having a car, not having any of the friends or people that I'd considered my family for 10 years in my life anymore. I was in Hawaii for a couple of months, and then things were just not working out for me. And I had this crazy thought that I needed to go to New York and I was going to find my husband there, which I did, surprisingly. But I went back to New York and stayed with my aunt, and the room was just kind of like a closet-sized room. And it was really difficult for me. As much as I love my aunt, fast forward, I'm a grown woman now who's been on my own for so long, and I'm a very, very independent, headstrong person. So having to rely on other people and ask for help, I hated it. But sometimes you have to ask for help, and my aunt gave me that help. And it was really also difficult for me to just be I'm this 30-year-old woman living in this closet-sized room at my aunt's house. My uncle, terrible drunk. I would wake up sometimes to the stench of alcohol seeping through the walls because he drank so much. I mean, it was extreme, and I would cry. I would watch Super Soul Sunday. I'd go to the library and get books. I would run in the morning. I would run at night. I mean, I did everything that I could to stay sane. I was unemployed for almost 2 years. Right before I went to Hawaii, I lost my job. I had tendonitis in my wrist. I was a massage therapist. So I ended up spending over 2 years unemployed because I didn't have a vehicle. Where I was in upstate New York, it's just, there aren't too many jobs anyway. And I didn't have any money. I mean, I had nothing at that point. And it was definitely the rock bottom of my life. I was on food stamps for a while. I was mortified, just because of the stigma that's there. Yeah, and I was trying. I mean, I was spending a good 5-6 hours every day just applying to jobs, doing cover letters, everything. But
so go in your mind and think. This life event can be mental, physical, or spiritual, tell me about a time in your life that you can relate with the word war.
When my brother died, I was definitely at war with myself. I mean, emotionally, spiritually, physically. It was a long, drawn out struggle with my guilt, with my grief, with my anger. I mean, all of those things. I mean, I sat in that for a really, really long time. I wouldn't say that I sat in it. I would say that I drowned in it. When he was killed, he was killed in a motor vehicle accident, and I had also just accepted a volunteer position advocating for children that were growing up in abusive and neglectful homes. So on top of his death, I was training to be a voice for these children, and just, at the same time really thinking about everything that we'd went through as children. My sister wasn't there yet, so it was me and him hiding in the closet, holding hands, being scared. He was really physically abusive when we were younger, but also just seeing everything that he'd been through. My father was physically abusive to him. So dealing with all of that, and I also had just started a job as a nanny with a little girl who looked very similar to me, and she was just very similar to me as a child. So it was like there was all this stuff all at once, and there was no getting away from it because I had these duties. I wasn't going to quit my job. I couldn't quit my job, and I had signed up to be a volunteer. And I know that they would have understood if I had, taken a step back, but I didn't want to do that. And I really thought about, doing it kind of in my brother's honor. But I definitely, I went through the ringer over and over again with myself. Just, the guilt of an older sibling, the guilt of having put our relationship at kind of arm's length because of a lot of the things going on, because of the way he spoke to me, because of the way he treated me. Frustration with my mother and my aunt over what happened. So yeah, I was definitely at war with myself for a while there.
How would you say you got through that war?
Exercise and alcohol. I mean, if we're being honest, I was like a little freaking pinball going back and forth. I mean, I would like drink in the bathroom and just cry for hours, and then I'd get up and go to work for the week and go to the gym, at 5:30 in the morning, so I couldn't drink. And I was still getting a handle on not drinking through the emotions at that time. I won't say that alcohol helped. It definitely numbed things so that I could do the things that I needed to do. Exercise is my go-to for dealing with any kind of stress. Exercise is my thing. I like to lift weights. I will think about all the things that make me angry when I'm lifting weights. I obviously couldn't see it when it was happening, but now I see all the ways in which his death really opened a lot of things up for me, because I made the choice to investigate and be curious and use it to my advantage. That sounds really horrible, using it to my advantage, but otherwise I'm just going to be upset. I'm just going to be angry that he didn't get to change completely. I'll never know what he was doing. I don't know if he was on the phone. I have asked myself that question a million times. And I think that, spiritually, that is that's really what has gotten me like through so many things in my life. And that's why I choose to be very spiritual and faithful and whatever it is, because when I pray for a sign, when I ask for a sign, I get it. And I get it quick these days because I'm paying attention. You know, when I was younger, I used to have to be hit with it a couple times. But you know, when he passed and I had to drive to my job, I was terrified of getting in the car. My anxiety was so debilitating, but I didn't have a choice. I didn't have somebody to drive me. And for a while there, the song that I chose for his funeral would come on, like when I got in the car and everything, and just little things here and there. And I definitely felt like he's with me.
So same type of question. Go in your mind and think, this life event can be mental, physical, or spiritual. Tell me about a time in your life that you can relate with the word peace.
When I was a nanny, when they get to sleep, like when they go to sleep on your chest. Yeah, the last little person I took care of, he was, oh my goodness, he was just a couple months. He was so snuggly and sweet, and he loved me and I loved him. And yeah, it was like my favorite time of day was like his nap time, because he would just snuggle right into me and go right to sleep. And then it's like, oh, I gotta sit here for 2 hours and just smell his little baby head, and that's it. Sit here in the chair. And it was a very peaceful time for me. And that was, I would say, about 8 or 9 months after my brother passed. And yeah, I thought, who knows, like this could be my brother's spirit coming back, you know. Who knows? Yeah, that's peaceful to me. Just hanging out with my husband is usually peaceful. Yeah, I have a lot of quiet and peace in my life right now, which is very welcomed after the many years in my family's home.
Can you tell me about a truly difficult time in your life, how that felt and how you endured?
I don't know which one to pick. In 2016, I got married in October, and we got pregnant pretty quickly. I found out around Thanksgiving, and on Thanksgiving Day, one of my very dear friends passed away from liver cancer. She had been fighting for 5 years. Her name's Rhonda. And I booked a flight to come down to her funeral. And I was by myself. The day after her funeral, I started spotting. I went to the ER. They wouldn't do anything for me. I ended up having a miscarriage. So I was down here by myself without my husband. I just went through my friend's funeral. She was like a big sister to me. And I was just completely grief-stricken. I was angry that my friend was dead. I was angry that, you know, something could even be wrong with anything that my husband and I made together, because people always try to make you feel better and say, oh, there was something wrong with it. This wasn't the time, you know. None of those things are things that a woman wants to hear after having a miscarriage. And yeah, that was just, and the thing is, I was working in a job that I really did not like anymore. And I didn't like it because, you know, they were nasty to me, but they just didn't treat me right, no matter what. And that was one of those instances where I should have paid attention to the signs before it cost me, you know, having a miscarriage, because I think the stress of work they were giving me grief about going down to my friend's funeral. And all of that just kind of exploded. And, you know, when I came back, I ended up having 2 weeks off because I was on bed rest. And it was tough. It was really tough. And I mean, the place that I worked for was a mental health facility, and nobody even asked me if I was okay. Like, I'd worked there almost 4 years, and I did quit soon after, and we ended up moving back down here to Asheville. But that was incredibly heartbreaking. It was hard enough to lose my friend, but to have that on top of it, was.
What were some of the things you did that helped you just make it through that?
Oh my God. I just cried. I mean, I just cried and cried and cried, and I think I keep to myself a lot when I'm going through stuff. I definitely like keep it in. I don't let people see it. You know, as for my friend passing, I knew how much she had been through, you know, in those 5 years. And I knew that she was tired, and that's what she wanted, was to go home and see her dad and everything. And it helps me to be less angry, like knowing that she's been reunited with her dad. You know, as for my miscarriage, I don't know that there's ever anything you can turn that into. It is what it is. And that's, you know, a lot of the heartbreaks in my life have been just acceptance. It's, you know, I'm very big into like, what can I change about this? How can I make it positive? But there's no making that positive. The only thing I can say that I really, you know, took from that is to stop staying in jobs that I didn't get paid well. I got treated like shit. And it had nothing to do with my career field or, you know, anything like that. And it really just reinforced that to me, that my health is more important than any job, any amount of money, any of that. And that's, you know, that kind of came back around this last winter when I decided to leave my previous position and decided to just do my own thing, go into business with myself. So.
Can you tell me about a truly joyous moment in your life and how that felt?
Yeah, my wedding day. Sailing around Australia and my wedding day. My wedding day was perfect. I never, ever wanted to get married. I swore up and down I was never getting married. But my wedding day was absolutely perfect. There was no hiccups, anything like that. I woke up, all my girls had like stayed the night. We got ready together. We had a little fall wedding in upstate New York, so the leaves were like just starting to pop and everything. It was on a little lake, and I was able to pick out like all my favorite songs and everything, and it was really beautiful just to have everybody there with us that day, and to, oh my goodness, like see how far I'd come, you know, and changing myself, that I was even willing to enter into something so scary. Yeah, it was perfect. We our first dance was to Stand By Me, which is one of my favorite songs, and got a little tipsy, not too tipsy, still had a really good time. Everybody got home safely. The pictures are gorgeous, and yeah, it's one of my favorite days.
What keeps you up at night?
Not much anymore, surprisingly. I really slowed my roll in trying to help other people out of their own stuff. You know, I'm happy to like be a light for them, but ultimately they're going to learn. They're going to learn, you know, their own lessons. And, you know, I used to really worry about work for somebody else. What am I going to do wrong? What am I going to get yelled at for? Like just all of those things. And I don't worry like that anymore. I feel like I've had the time to like center myself and stuff like that. I know that everybody can be taken anytime, and that's, you know, try not to worry myself with that.
What keeps you going every day?
For so many years, I think it was my sister. I think it was, you know, wanting her to see and have a strong female in her life. And now I think it's just me. Like when you're in a pandemic and you don't have kids and you don't have to get up and you work for yourself, you better have a reason to get out of bed. And in the beginning of the pandemic, I definitely hit a day where I was just like, who gives a shit? No, nobody needs me. Nobody needs me right now. And I let myself be a drama queen for about 24 hours. People do need me. People do need to hear the things I have to say. Yeah, and I really just strive to be a good person, strive to be somebody that others can learn from, can look at and say like, she's been through some stuff. I don't think a lot of people, you know, when you see somebody strong, like most people don't think like, I wonder what they've been through to get them there. And that is my first thought now is like, oh, that's a strong person. I'm like, what they have to go through to get there. But yeah, I would say for me, I mean, I get up for my husband too, but for me, I still have a lot of things I want to accomplish.
Imagine you're in the hospital today with only hours to live. What would be your regrets, if any?
I wouldn't say that I don't really have too many regrets. And I know like everybody wants to hear something, but I have been living my life in such a much more authentic way than I used to, you know, the past few years. And because I've lost so many people, I am authentic in my relationships, both good and bad. You know, if we're good, we're good. But I don't have time to play with people that are not genuine, that are jealous, that take advantage, any of those things. I don't do that anymore. I have a very small circle of friends. I know that I can count on my girls. They've all been my friends since we were teenagers. I would say one thing that does maybe keep me up a little bit at night, my relationship with my sister. We do not speak anymore. And in January, I just had enough. I love her more than anybody on the face of this earth, and I would do anything for her. But for so many years, I've been letting her treat me in a way that I would never, ever allow anybody else to treat me. And I've let her do that because of, you know, I carried a lot of guilt for abandoning her, you know, when she was younger, and just that I couldn't fix everything for her. And I think that I finally got to a point where I released myself from that guilt of knowing that I had to survive, even if that meant leaving her. She's going to be 25 this year, and we got into an argument, and she hung up on me, And against my better judgment, I called and left her a voicemail. I regret leaving that voicemail. I do not regret, what I told her, which was basically, I will not allow you to hold me hostage any longer for this, because you're 25 and you've been creating your life for the past 7 years. And if you don't like it, that's on you, because all of these things that you're upset and angry about, I tried to tell you. I tried to help you navigate, and you did not want to hear it. And that was especially difficult after having lost my brother, and all of the guilt that I went through over his death, knowing that my sister could die any day. She could get in an accident. Anything could happen to her. And, I won't know if she doesn't like me, if she's just jealous, if she hates me. Like, I have no idea. She won't talk to me. And it breaks my heart. It's one of the worst feelings ever. But having somebody that you love that deeply treat you in the way that I feel like she's treated me over the years, I just will not do it anymore. I won't do it in a job. I won't do it in a relationship, no matter who it's with. I don't want to be treated like that anymore. And it's really hard, because you definitely second guess yourself. You definitely question, like, should I reach out? Should I apologize? It's like, I've talked to a therapist about it. I've talked to friends about it, people that know her, and they're like, you should have done that a long time ago. And hopefully, hopefully one day we will talk again, and hopefully we'll be in each other's lives. But I think that she's very much on her own path right now. And I hope that it's healing for her. But, truth hurts sometimes. And that's, just the way she treated me. I definitely can't deal with that anymore.
So you're obviously not on the hospital bed. You're alive and well. Do you feel that you can make peace with that situation overall?
Yeah, because I know that my words were not, while I was angry, those words are things that I have saved up for years. And while leaving it in a voicemail, probably not the best way to do it, I'm really fucking proud of myself for finally standing up for myself to the one person who has the ability to do the most damage to me. Nobody can wound me like my sister does, because I've never loved anybody the way that I love my sister. I feel like she really saved my life. I've never given so freely, and I've also never been treated in such a way, by anybody but her. And it's, I think all of our abusive relationships go back to our family. That's where they are rooted. And for me, this past winter was really about, like, weeding out the most toxic things, and quitting that job, and having that conversation with my sister was incredibly difficult. But I do feel confident that, I did what's right for me.
You told me what your dreams were as a kid. What are your dreams now?
For my business to make it through this pandemic. I want to have a little log cabin, in the country. I want to continue working for myself. My hours, my way, all that stuff. I definitely want to write a book. I think I still want to get my master's, maybe. I really just want to travel too. I want to travel and see all the places. Yeah.
You're the author of your life book. What's your picture perfect ending?
Me traveling. Yeah, like that's always been where my heart has been at, is traveling. And there's so many places I want to go. I mean, just based on my experience in Australia and Hawaii, being able to see the little tucked away places, and then the really, the other stuff, it's like it helps me stay vivacious and all of those things. And yeah, I really just want to travel and be healthy and be peaceful.
That's it.
Thank you.